Hey all, what's up? In this video, we're going to start Unit 6, which is market failures and how the government responds to those failures. In this video specifically, we're going to look at socially efficient market outcomes and go into our first market failure, which is public goods. And so before we start, let's bring back the jokes. What happens when a frog's car breaks down? It gets towed. Get it? T-O-A-D. All right, so socially efficient and inefficient market outcomes. So before we actually get into the really heavy stuff about this topic, right, we first have to go over a basic supply and demand graph. But in this case, right, our supply is going to be marginal cost and our demand is going to be marginal benefit. And so the reason why our marginal cost is upward sloping is because the more you consume of a product, the greater that cost is going to be. And the reason why marginal benefit is downward sloping is the more you consume of the product, your marginal benefit, the additional benefit that you get from consuming good after good after good is going to decrease and decrease and decrease. And so much like supply and demand, right, where supply meets demand is going to represent our market equilibrium and our price equilibrium. The same thing is true with marginal cost and marginal benefit. We want to consume where marginal cost intersects with marginal benefit. That is the socially efficient and socially desired quantity. In other words, that is how much quantity society wants and how much society is willing to pay for that specific output or for that specific quantity. So here, right, if we're producing at, let's say that this was 1 unit. Well, there's not enough output being produced because at one quantity, at 1 unit, right, our marginal benefit is up here, right? And then our marginal cost is down here. So our marginal benefit outweighs our marginal cost, meaning that there's not enough output that is being produced here. Society wants more of whatever this product is. And the flip side is true, right? In this scenario, let's say that this was, let's say 10 units. At 10 units, our marginal cost, right, outweighs our marginal benefit, right? Which is what we see right here. Marginal cost is greater than our marginal benefit here. So at this point, the government or whoever's producing this good has produced way too many goods. And because of that, they need to reduce their output. They need to reduce the quantity of goods they're producing because society doesn't want that many. And so that's why where our marginal cost meets our marginal benefit is the most socially efficient quantity and or really quantity and price. And so that's why there is no deadweight loss whenever the government or the company produces where marginal cost intersects with marginal benefit here. And it's basically the same concept as our supply and demand, right? Consumer and producer surplus, total surplus is maximized when we produce where supply meets demand. The same thing is true here. Where marginal cost equals marginal benefit, that is the most efficient outcome, and because of that, there is no deadweight loss there. And so, if we go way back to Unit 1, with this idea of the invisible hand, remember, the invisible hand is tied with the free market. And the invisible hand states that the government does not need to get involved, since the needs of societies are already met. And if there is a problem, the invisible hand will sort of maneuver our economy to get us back to that socially efficient output, socially efficient quantity. And so our example is with our second bullet point here. Well, if society wants computers and people are willing to pay high prices, well then what are companies going to do? Well, companies are going to produce more computers and are going to price it relatively high because people want computers and are willing to pay a high price there. That's basically the invisible hand. There is no need for the government to step in. Well, this entire unit is then, well, what happens if the market fails? What happens if the invisible hand fails and the market fails to produce what society wants? And that's essentially what a market failure is. A market failure is a situation in which the free market system fails, right? It fails to provide what society wants here. And so what we mean by that is the private markets, they are not acting or producing in an efficient manner. And so when that happens, the government is going to be called upon to help fix the problems. So whenever there is a market failure, the government is going to step in, right? And try to get to that productive and allocative efficient mark, right? They want to have society be socially efficient. And so we're going to focus on 4 different market failures here: public goods, externalities, monopolies, and unequal distribution of income. And so here today, we're going to focus on public goods. The next video is going to be externalities, and the last video is going to be unequal distribution of income. We are not going to go over monopolies because we covered that with Unit 4, right? Where does the government put in the price ceilings for monopolies there? That's basically what this third market failure is. And since we already went over that, we're not going to re-go over it here. So here, right, how do we determine how many airplanes or parks to produce? Well, the government still uses supply and demand, right? How much airplanes producers are willing to supply, and they weigh it against what is the demand for airplanes here. But when we're referring to market failures, we don't really refer to it supply and demand. Instead, we talk about this idea of marginal social benefit. In other words, that is the demand curve. The marginal social benefit is how much the good is benefiting society. And so we're going to equate that with our demand curve. Well, our supply curve is marginal social cost. How much does it cost to produce an additional airplane or an additional good? So much like we want to produce where supply meets demand, where marginal cost equals marginal benefit, we want to produce where our marginal social benefit equals our marginal social cost. And that is going to be really our socially efficient output and socially efficient price there. Right? So we want to produce, yet again, there's a separate slide because it's such an important point. The socially optimal quantity is where marginal social benefit meets or intersects with our marginal social cost. So let's put this into practice here. So let's say that there is the demand for a new park, right? The community, society wants more parks here. Well, we're going to make 2 assumptions with our scenario, with our example here. There are only 2 people in the society. We have Adam and we have Jill. These are the only 2 people living in this society. And each additional park is going to cost $5. Well, the question is, well, how many parks should be actually made? Well, we know for one park, right? For a single park, Adam is willing to pay up to $4 for that single park. Jill is willing to pay up to $5 here, right? Well, for 5 parks, Adam is willing to pay $0. Adam does not want 5 parks. Well, Jill is only willing to pay $1 for 5 parks. And so here, yet again, right? Right? We see diminishing marginal returns here, right? The more parks that are being produced, right? The benefit or the perceived benefit that Adam is going to get out of those parks and that Jill is going to get out of the parks is going to decrease and decrease and decrease here. And so how do we find the marginal social benefit? Well, it's just like how we got to the market demand way back in Unit 2, right? The market demand is just all the individual demands added up together. Well, society's demand or marginal social benefit is just the marginal benefit of every single person in society added up together. And in this case, we said with our scenario that there are only 2 people in the society, Adam and Jill. So for one park, right, the marginal social benefit is $9, right? Or the $4 Adam is willing to pay plus the $5 that Jill is willing to pay. Right? And so for 2 parks, right, the marginal social benefit is 7. For 3 parks, the marginal social benefit is 5. For 4 parks, the marginal social benefit is 3. And for 5 parks, the marginal social benefit is 1, right? We're just adding Adam's marginal benefit plus Jill's marginal benefit to get to the marginal social benefit, which is society's demand. Well, now that we know that, how do we get to the marginal social cost? Well, we said, right, at the very beginning, is that each park is going to cost $5. So for the first park, it's going to cost $5. Well, how much is that second park going to cost? Well, it's going to cost an additional $5. What on the third park? Well, to build the third park, it's going to cost an additional $5. The fourth park is $5, and the fifth park is $5 here. Well, now we're at the point is, well, how many parks is society going to want? Right? And remember, we said, right, that the most socially optimal quantity is where marginal social cost equals our marginal social benefit. So we don't really care about what Adam and Jill is willing to pay individually now that we have our marginal social benefit here. And so we are going to say, right, that society wants 3 parks. Because at 3 parks, Adam and Jill's marginal social benefit is $5, and it's going to cost an additional $5 to build that third park. And because of that, for this 2-person society, the optimal number of parks is 3. And here's a cleaned up version of what I just said in the last slide. And so the demand curve is equal to the marginal benefit to society, right? Which should make sense. We went over this concept earlier on in this video. Well, that means, right, our supply curve, our marginal social cost is perfectly elastic. Why? Well, because the cost of building an additional park, an additional good, is theoretically going to remain the same. The cost of the first park is the same cost as building the 5th park or the 3rd park or the 100th park. And because of that, right, our marginal social cost, our supply curve, is perfectly elastic in this case. And so just like we went over, it's inefficient to build 1 park because at this point, our marginal social benefit, right, is greater than our marginal social cost. Society just wants more parks in general. Well, building 4 parks is also inefficient, right? Our marginal social cost is greater than our marginal social benefit. So the government or society is producing way too many parks. And so that's why 3 parks is the socially efficient quantity. It's where the marginal social cost and the marginal social benefit curves are going to intersect with each other. That is the amount that society wants. And so that leads us to really, right, our first type of market failure, which is a long-winded way, long, windy road to get here, which is public and private goods. So the public sector is the part of the economy that is controlled by the government. So if you work for the government, you work for the public sector. If you work for private individuals and private companies, you work in the private sector. Right? And so private sector companies and individuals primarily work to make profit, right? The public sector goods, yes, they want to make money, but at the same time, they're working for the greater good of society by working for the government itself. And so why must the government provide goods and services, right? Why are there public goods? Why is there a public sector? Well, because it's impractical for the free market to provide these goods because there's little opportunity to earn profit because of the free rider problem. The free rider problem is individuals that benefit from the good without paying into the service or the good itself. So an example are streetlights. It is impractical for private companies to produce and provide that service of street lights. Why? Well, because they can't make a profit. There is no way to turn off the lights for those who don't want to pay for that service or for those who just don't pay for that service altogether. Right? If person A doesn't pay for a street light, it's not like the company can just shut off the lights for that one person, right? Because the street lights are on highways. It's on public property. And so that's when the government has to step in and provide these goods and services because these private companies are not going to provide them because they can't segregate the market and decline the service to those who don't pay into the good itself. And so the thing that's wrong with free riders, it prevents firms from making a profit. And because of that, firms are really hesitant to provide those goods and services. And so it feels solely left up to the free market. All these essential services like sanitation, like streetlights, like national defense would be underproduced because companies wouldn't be able to make a profit and they wouldn't be able to discount those or prevent those from that aren't paying for the good, right? They can't prevent them from consuming the good. And that's when the government is going to step in, right? And provide these goods and services in lieu of these private companies. And so there are 2 ways the government can solve the free rider problem. 1, find new ways to punish free riders. This is extremely difficult, right? In our example of streetlights, it's very difficult to know whether someone or not paid their taxes or paid for the streetlights itself. So more often than not, the government is going to use the second way or the second solution to the free rider problem, which is to use tax dollars to provide the service for everyone. So it doesn't matter if you pay into the good or not, right? Because everyone's tax dollars are being used to provide this public service, right? Or to provide this public good, that everyone has the opportunity to use it. And so public goods have to have two criteria here. One, they have to be non-exclusionary. In other words, you cannot exclude people from using it. And number two, it has to be non-rival or shared consumption. That one person's consumption does not reduce the usefulness of that good for other people. So if we're looking at streetlights again, because you use streetlights, that does not reduce the usefulness of the streetlights towards another person or towards other members of society, right? That is non-rival or shared consumption. And so to be a public good, you have to meet both criteria here. You have to be non-exclusionary, and you also need to, the good also needs to be non-rival or shared consumption. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you guys learned a lot, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace.